The rain had turned the churchyard into a field of black umbrellas and darker mourning clothes, but Eleanor Ashford stood apart from the congregation, her veil too thin to hide the fact that she wept alone. Her father's coffin descended into the earth with the same indifference the man had shown her during the final 15 years of his life, ever since she had refused Lord Pemberton's proposal at 23 and destroyed what he called her one chance at redemption from mediocrity. The mourners dispersed quickly. Rain was an excellent excuse to avoid the eldest Miss Ashford, who had become something of a village curiosity. A woman who had turned 38 without husband or prospect, who had nursed an invalid father while her 3 younger sisters married and moved to London, Bath, and Edinburgh respectively. Eleanor heard the whispers as clearly as if they were shouted. Wasted her youth, too particular, too plain now to afford pride. She walked back to Ashford House alone, her half-boots sinking into mud that would ruin them beyond saving. It hardly mattered. The solicitor, Mr. Denham, had written ahead to request a meeting this very afternoon. She knew what he would say. Her father had altered his will 7 years ago, when his disappointment in her had calcified into something resembling contempt. The estate would pass to a distant male cousin. Eleanor would receive a small annuity, perhaps £60 per year, and a request to vacate the house within the month. The house smelled of camphor and old fires. She removed her sodden cloak and bonnet, noting that even the servants had begun to disappear. Mrs. Hewitt, the housekeeper, had given notice that morning. The remaining staff would follow within days, seeking positions in households with futures. Mr. Denham arrived at 3 o'clock precisely, his leather case bulging with documents. He settled into her father's study, no longer her father's, she reminded herself, and arranged papers across the desk with the careful movements of a man delivering a death sentence. Miss Ashford, I shall be direct. Your father's estate, including this house and its contents, passes to Mr. Gerald Ashford of Yorkshire. Your annual provision is £45, payable quarterly. You are requested to remove yourself by the 1st of May. 6 weeks. £45 would barely cover lodging in a respectable boarding house, let alone food, clothing, or medical care. Eleanor felt the room tilt slightly, then corrected itself. I see. Thank you for your clarity, Mr. Denham. There is, however, another matter. He withdrew a sealed letter from his case. This arrived for you this morning, forwarded from London. The sender is the Dowager Marchioness of Severley. Eleanor took the heavy paper, noting the ducal seal she did not recognize. She had never heard of any Marchioness of Severley. Mr. Denham departed, leaving her alone with the letter. She broke the seal. Miss Ashford, you do not know me, but I knew your mother before her marriage. I find myself in need of a companion of intelligence and discretion. The position offers accommodation in my London residence, an annual salary of £120, and the expectation of stimulating but not arduous company. If this interests you, present yourself at Severley House, Grosvenor Square, before the 20th of April. I do not require a response. Either you will come or you will not. Henrietta Cavendish, Dowager Marchioness of Severley. Eleanor read it twice more. £120. A home in London. The alternative was a boarding house in some provincial town where she would dwindle into complete invisibility. She began packing that night. April 18th, 1847, London. Severley House stood at the corner of Grosvenor Square like a statement of ancient power that required no elaboration. Eleanor climbed the steps with her single trunk, following behind in a hired cart, aware that her traveling dress was 5 years out of fashion and her bonnet had been retrimmed so many times, the original shape was a distant memory. The butler who answered her knock examined her with the particular neutrality servants reserve for persons of ambiguous status. Miss Eleanor Ashford, expected by the Dowager Marchioness. He admitted her into a hall of black and white marble, then disappeared. Eleanor waited, studying the portraits lining the walls. Severe faces, unsmiling. The Cavendish family, she assumed. Then her eyes caught on a more recent portrait, and she stopped breathing. The man was perhaps 35, painted in riding clothes against a stormy sky. Dark hair, darker eyes, and a face that would have been classically handsome except for the scar that ran from his left temple to his jaw. A pale line that spoke of violence survived, but it was his expression that arrested her. Utter isolation. A man painted as if he stood on the far side of an unbridgeable distance from the rest of humanity. My son. Eleanor turned. The woman who had entered was perhaps 70, dressed in lavender silk that suggested she had emerged from full mourning, but not abandoned it entirely. Her face was sharp with intelligence and something else, a bone-deep weariness. "Your Grace," Eleanor curtsied. "Henrietta will suffice in private. You came. Good. I feared you might be too proud. I cannot afford pride, ma'am. No one can, truly. But most persist in the delusion." Henrietta gestured toward the drawing room. "Come. We shall be frank with one another, as I despise wasted time." The drawing room was furnished in the French style, elegant and cold. Henrietta poured tea herself, waving away a hovering maid. "I knew your mother when we were both girls. She was extraordinary, truly brilliant. Our fathers agreed we should never speak of her interests in natural philosophy, lest we frighten away suitors. She married your father, and I often wondered if she regretted it." Eleanor accepted the tea. "She died when I was 11. I remember her teaching me Latin in secret." "Yes, she would have." Henrietta's eyes were distant. "I am hiring you because I believe you inherited her mind, and I have need of someone who can think. My son, the current Marquess of Severly, has been residing primarily in our Scottish estate for the past 9 years. He was injured during, well, the circumstances do not matter. He has recently consented to return to London, but he cannot be left to his own devices." Eleanor thought of the portrait. "You wish me to spy on him. I wish you to befriend him, if possible, to prevent him from complete withdrawal. He will not tolerate fawning or pity, and he has spent years driving away everyone I send. You, I suspect, are sufficiently practical to refuse to be driven." "What happened to him?" Henrietta's face hardened. 9 years ago, my son was engaged to Lady Caroline Westhaven. She was beautiful, accomplished, and universally admired. 1 week before the wedding, he was attacked on the road from our estate. 3 men, daggers, and the brutality that suggested more than simple robbery. He survived. The scarring is extensive. Lady Caroline visited him once during his convalescence, fainted at the sight of him, and broke the engagement by letter 3 days later. She married his closest friend 6 months after. My son has not attended a social function since, and he speaks to me perhaps once per month." Eleanor felt something cold settle in her chest. "You believe I can succeed where others have failed because I am too old and plain to inspire his defensiveness. I believe you can succeed because you understand what it is to be invisible in plain sight, and because you are not here to save him. You are here to survive. That honesty may be the only thing he can tolerate." It was a strange sort of insult wrapped around a stranger sort of compliment. Eleanor set down her teacup. "When does he arrive?" "Tomorrow. Your rooms are prepared on the 3rd floor. You will take meals with me unless otherwise requested. Your duties include reading correspondence I find tedious, accompanying me on charitable visits I find exhausting, and making yourself available should my son require rational conversation. You are not a servant, but neither are you family. The ambiguity may prove useful." Eleanor spent the evening unpacking her meager belongings into a suite of rooms more spacious than any she had ever occupied. She stood at the window looking down at Grosvenor Square and felt, for the first time in months, something other than dread. It was not hope, but it was not despair either. April 19th, 1847. The Marquess of Severly arrived at noon in a black carriage with no crest, accompanied by a single valet. Eleanor watched from the music room window as he descended. A tall man who moved with the careful deliberation of someone who had learned not to draw attention to physical imperfection. He wore his hat low, his collar high. Even from a distance, she could see the tension in his shoulders. He did not greet his mother. He simply walked past the assembled servants and disappeared into the West Wing. Henrietta found Eleanor an hour later. "He has requested dinner in his rooms. This is typical. You will join me in the dining room at 7. The dinner was elaborate for 2 people. Henrietta spoke of neighborhood gossip and parliamentary debates with equal dismissiveness, and Eleanor found herself responding with observations she had kept silent for years. It felt dangerous and intoxicating to be heard. On the 5th day, Eleanor encountered the Marquess. She had been reading in the library, a first edition of Evelina she was savoring slowly, when the door opened. She looked up and met the eyes of the man from the portrait. In person, the scar was more brutal. It had healed badly, pulling at the corner of his left eye and mouth, but the eyes themselves were extraordinary, gray like winter water and searingly intelligent. He stopped. She could see him calculating whether to retreat or proceed. Eleanor made the decision for him. She marked her page and set the book aside. "My lord, I am Eleanor Ashford, your mother's companion. I know who you are." His voice was rough, as if underused. "She has mentioned you repeatedly. I expect she is hoping I will civilize you through feminine influence and gentle persuasion." The corner of his mouth twitched, the right corner, where the scar did not interfere. "And will you? I have no talent for either. I suspect she hired me because I'm too old to be romantic about anything and too desperate to quit easily." He was silent for a long moment. Then he crossed to the shelves, selected a volume, and sat in the chair opposite hers. He did not speak again, but he did not leave. This became their pattern. Each afternoon, Eleanor read in the library. Sometimes the Marquess appeared, sometimes he did not. When he did, they sat in silence, reading. Once, he spoke to correct her pronunciation of a Greek passage. Twice, she asked his opinion on a passage from Adam Smith. He answered both times with the careful precision of a man who had forgotten how to engage in ordinary conversation. On the 14th day, he arrived carrying a chessboard. "Do you play?" Eleanor considered the board. "Poorly. My father thought it unsuitable. Mine insisted upon it. We shall be poorly matched then." They played. He won easily, but seemed more interested in explaining where she had erred than in victory. The next day, they played again. The day after, again. By the third week, they were speaking of other things: books, philosophy, the ridiculousness of certain social conventions. He had a mind like cut glass, brilliant and sharp and utterly unforgiving of imprecision. Eleanor found herself preparing for their conversations the way she might have prepared for an examination, anticipating his challenges, sharpening her arguments. "You enjoy arguing," he observed one afternoon. "I enjoy being wrong in interesting ways," she corrected. "It is the only form of education left to me. You could have married. Surely some man would have valued your mind." The comment stung, though she kept her face neutral. "I was offered precisely one proposal at 23. Lord Pemberton. He was 67, a widower with 4 children, and wanted a nursemaid he could bed without paying wages. I declined, and my father never forgave me." The Marquess set down his book. "Your father was a fool." "Yes." Eleanor's throat was tight, "but he controlled my life nonetheless. And now I am here, trading one form of dependence for another, but at least your mother does not despise me for existing." He was quiet for so long she thought she had offended him. Then, "I despise pity more than anything in this world. Do not offer it to me. I have none to spare, my lord. I reserve it all for myself." His laugh was brief and rusty, but genuine. May 1847. Henrietta began insisting Eleanor accompany her on social calls. Eleanor understood the strategy. If the Marquess was to be drawn back into society, it must be gradual. Henrietta's guests were carefully selected: older women, intellectuals, reformers, people who valued conversation over spectacle. But London society had not forgotten the Marquess of Severley. Whispers followed Eleanor wherever she went. Is it true he lives like a hermit? Is the scarring truly that severe? Will he ever marry? One afternoon, Eleanor returned from a particularly exhausting visit to find the Marquess in the library, but not reading. He stood at the window, his back rigid. "They are discussing me," he said without turning. "I can feel it, the weight of their speculation." Eleanor set down her reticule. "They are, but speculation is all they have. You owe them nothing. My mother believes I owe them a return to normalcy, an appearance at some ball or dinner, a demonstration that I have not become a complete recluse. And what do you believe?" He turned. The afternoon light fell across his face without mercy. "I believe that the moment I set foot in a ballroom, I will become a curiosity, the scarred Marquess. Women will recoil. Men will offer false hardiness. I will be trapped in a performance I have no wish to give." Eleanor understood that particular prison. "Then, do not go. And remain here forever? A ghost in my own house?" She crossed to stand beside him at the window. Outside, carriages rolled past. Elegant people, living elegant lives. There is a difference between choosing solitude and accepting exile. If you attend these events because your mother demands it, you surrender your will. If you attend because you have decided they cannot touch you, that is power. You make it sound simple. It is not. I have spent 18 years being invisible because I feared being seen as a failure. I am not recommending my example. He looked at her directly. "You are not invisible to me. Something in Eleanor's chest cracked open. June 1847. The invitation arrived in mid-June. A garden party at the home of the Duke of Ashmont, a man known for his intellectual salons and progressive politics. Henrietta presented it to her son at breakfast. Ashmont's gatherings are small, thoughtful. You would be among friends. The Marquess, Eleanor had learned his given name was Thomas, though she had never used it, stared at the invitation as if it were a summons to execution. Eleanor, seated across from him, spoke carefully. I am told the Duke's gardens include a remarkable collection of rare botanicals. If the company proves intolerable, there are always the plants. Thomas met her eyes. Will you attend? Henrietta interjected, before Eleanor could respond. Miss Ashford is my companion, not a guest. Then I shall not go. Thomas, if Miss Ashford is refused admittance to a gathering on the grounds of her employment, then the gathering is not worth attending. Henrietta looked between them, her expression unreadable. Very well. I shall inform the Duke that you will attend with your mother and her companion. The morning of the garden party, Eleanor discovered a box in her room. Inside was a gown of deep blue silk, simple in cut but exquisitely made, with a matching shawl. A note in Henrietta's hand. You cannot attend in 10-year-old muslin. Do not argue. She dressed with trembling hands. The gown fit perfectly. When she looked in the mirror, she saw a woman she barely recognized. Not young, not beautiful, but present, visible. Thomas waited in the hall. He wore a coat of dark gray that made his eyes luminous. The scar was fully visible. He had stopped attempting to hide it. You look well, he said quietly. As do you, my lord. Thomas, if we are to endure this together, you should use my name. The garden party was exactly as advertised. Perhaps 40 guests scattered across manicured lawns, engaged in conversations that ranged from poetry to engineering. Eleanor found herself drawn into a discussion of agricultural reform with 2 members of Parliament and a botanist from Kew Gardens. She had forgotten what it was to be asked her opinion and have it considered seriously. She glanced across the lawn and saw Thomas engaged in conversation with the Duke himself, his posture less guarded than she had ever seen it. But then she saw her. Lady Caroline Westhaven, now Lady Caroline Thornton, stood near the rose garden, a vision in white muslin, her blonde hair arranged in perfect ringlets. She was speaking with her husband, a handsome man with an easy smile. Eleanor moved instinctively toward Thomas, but she was too late. Caroline had seen him. Her face went pale. She swayed slightly, and her husband caught her arm. The garden fell silent. Caroline's voice carried across the lawn. I find I am unwell. James, please. Her husband led her toward the house, throwing a single backward glance at Thomas that was impossible to interpret. Pity, perhaps, or guilt. Thomas stood utterly still, his face locked in an expression of absolute neutrality. Eleanor reached his side just as the whispers began. Walk with me, she said quietly. He did not respond. Thomas, walk with me now, or give them the spectacle they desire. That penetrated. He turned and walked with her toward the far end of the garden, where a small fountain played beneath a willow tree. They were hidden from view, but not so isolated as to seem furtive. I should not have come, he said, his voice flat. She is a coward. She is honest. 9 years ago, I was whole. She loved me, or believed she did. Then I became this. He gestured toward his face. She could not bear it. That is not villainy. That is human weakness. It is cruelty nonetheless. Eleanor's hands were shaking with rage she had no right to feel. She might have written, might have explained herself with gentleness. Instead, she abandoned you when you were most vulnerable and married your friend. Do not make excuses for her. And what would you have done, Eleanor? Had you been engaged to a man who became monstrous? She looked at him, truly looked, at the scar and the pain beneath it, and the extraordinary man who had survived something that should have destroyed him. I would have stayed, she said, not out of duty, not out of pity, but because the man I loved would still be himself, and I would be a fool to surrender that for vanity. Thomas stared at her. You cannot mean that. I have never been beautiful, my lord. I have never been young or charming or any of the things society values in women. What I have is the ability to see clearly, and I see you. His hand rose, hesitated, then touched her cheek with a gentleness that nearly undid her. Eleanor. Thomas. Henrietta's voice cut through the moment. She stood at the edge of the willow's shadow, her expression urgent. We must leave. Now. The carriage ride back to Grosvenor Square was tense with unspoken questions. Henrietta waited until they were inside the house before speaking. The Duke's housekeeper informed me that Lady Caroline suffered a severe nervous episode after your encounter. Her husband is demanding an apology from you, Thomas, for inflicting your presence upon his wife. Thomas's face went white with fury. I inflicted nothing. I was invited. I know. But Lord Thornton is well connected and vindictive. He is spreading word that you are unstable, dangerous even, and that society should refuse you admittance. Eleanor felt cold. They will destroy him. They will try. Henrietta looked at her son. You have 3 options. Withdraw from society entirely, which is what they expect. Challenge Thornton directly, which will create a scandal. Or what, Mother? Or demonstrate so conclusively that you are neither unstable nor pitiable, that their gossip becomes absurd. She paused. You could marry. The silence was absolute. Thomas laughed bitterly. Marry, yes. I am certain eligible ladies are lining up to attach themselves to a reclusive, scarred Marquess. Actually, Henrietta said, her eyes moving to Eleanor, I believe one might be. Eleanor's heart stopped. Mother, no. I will not allow you to. Allow me nothing. This is between Miss Ashford and myself. Henrietta turned to Eleanor. You care for him. Do not deny it. I have eyes. And he cares for you, though he is too wounded to admit it. A marriage between you would serve multiple purposes. It would silence Thornton's gossip. It would secure your future beyond the precariousness of paid companionship. And it would give my son a partner who sees him as he is. Eleanor could barely breathe. Your Grace, I am 38 years old, without fortune or connection. I would bring nothing to such a marriage except intelligence, courage, and the ability to endure what must be endured without collapsing into hysterics. These are not small things. Thomas was staring at Eleanor with an expression she could not interpret. Eleanor, you cannot wish for this, to bind yourself to me out of strategy. She should agree. She should retreat to her room and resign her position in the morning. But instead, she heard herself say, Ask me. What? If you wish to know what I want, ask me. Do not assume. He crossed the room slowly, as if approaching something fragile. When he was close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his gray eyes, he spoke. Eleanor Ashford, do you wish to marry me? Why do you wish to marry me? Because I have spent 3 months discovering that you are the most extraordinary person I have ever known. Because when I am with you, I forget to hate the world. Because you argued with me about Kantian ethics and made me laugh, and I did not know I could still do that. His voice dropped. Because I am half in love with you and terrified that you will vanish. Eleanor felt tears on her face. Then yes, I wish to marry you. July 1847. The engagement was announced quietly in the Morning Post. The responses ranged from shocked to scandalous. A Marquess marrying his mother's paid companion? A man of 35 binding himself to a woman of 38? The gossip was vicious. Eleanor was labeled a schemer, a fortune hunter who had manipulated her way into a title. Thomas was pitied as a man so desperate for acceptance he had settled for a woman past her prime. Henrietta ignored all of it. They will talk regardless. Let them exhaust themselves. But Lord Thornton did not exhaust himself. He began a whisper campaign suggesting Thomas was mentally unstable, that the attack 9 years ago had damaged more than his face, that Eleanor was a nurse, not a bride. Thomas wanted to ignore it. Eleanor refused. If we do not answer this, it will define us. And how do you propose we answer? We appear, together, at the largest social event of the season. That is Lady Pemberton's ball. 300 guests. I have not attended a ball in 9 years. Then it is time. The morning of the ball, Eleanor found Thomas in the library, his hands shaking. I cannot do this. She sat beside him. Yes, you can. They will stare. They will whisper. Caroline will likely attend, and I will have to watch her perform horror at my proximity. Then we shall give them nothing to perform against. We walk in together, we dance one dance, we leave. That is all. I do not dance anymore. Then we shall stand together and pretend. Thomas, you survived 3 men with daggers. You can survive a ballroom. He looked at her, and something in his face softened. How are you so brave? I am not brave. I am angry. There is a difference. Lady Pemberton's ballroom glittered with candlelight and jewels. Eleanor descended from the carriage in a gown of deep green silk. another gift from Henrietta, and felt the weight of every eye turn toward her and Thomas. He offered his arm. She took it. They entered together. The whispers began immediately, a susurrus of shock and speculation. Eleanor kept her head high, her hand steady on Thomas's arm. She saw Caroline across the room, pale and wide-eyed. She saw Lord Thornton smirk, and then the music began. Thomas led her onto the floor. She had not danced in 15 years. He had not danced in 9. They were clumsy and hesitant, but they moved together, and Eleanor realized something extraordinary. No one was laughing. They were watching, yes, but the expressions were not mockery. They were curiosity, reassessment. When the dance ended, Thomas did not lead her from the floor. Instead, he turned to face the room and spoke in a voice that carried, "I am Thomas Cavendish, Marquess of Severley. I was attacked and nearly killed 9 years ago. I survived, though I am scarred. I withdrew from society because I believed I had nothing left to offer it. I was wrong. This woman," he gestured to Eleanor, "has shown me that survival is not the end of the story. It is the beginning. We are to be married in August. If our union offends you, I invite you to absent yourself from the wedding. If it intrigues you, you are welcome to attend and witness what a true partnership looks like." Silence. Then, from the back of the room, the Duke of Ashmont began to applaud. Others joined. Not everyone. Caroline and Lord Thornton left immediately, but enough to matter. Eleanor felt Thomas's hand tighten on hers. "Thank you," he whispered. "For what?" "For seeing me." August 15th, 1847. The wedding took place in the chapel at Severley House, attended by fewer than 30 people. Henrietta wept. The Duke of Ashmont served as witness. Eleanor wore a simple gown of ivory silk and carried no bouquet. When Thomas lifted her veil, she saw tears in his eyes. "I never thought I would stand here again." "Neither did I." The vicar pronounced them married, and Thomas kissed her, gently, carefully, as if she were something precious. They honeymooned at the Scottish estate, a sprawling manor surrounded by wild moors. For 3 weeks, they walked and read and argued about philosophy and made love with the desperate tenderness of 2 people who had believed themselves unworthy of such intimacy. One morning, Eleanor woke to find Thomas watching her. "What are you thinking?" "That I was prepared to live the rest of my life in isolation, that I had convinced myself it was noble, and then you appeared, and you were so furious at the world and so determined to survive it, and I realized I wanted to fight too." Eleanor kissed him. "Then let us fight together." October 1849, London. Eleanor stood in the drawing room of Severley House, reading a letter from her youngest sister, who had written to congratulate her on the birth of her daughter. The child, Henrietta Eleanor Cavendish, slept in the nursery upstairs, watched over by a doting grandmother who claimed she had never known such happiness. Thomas entered, carrying a stack of correspondence. He had returned to Parliament the previous year, focusing on reform legislation. His scar had become familiar to London society, and while whispers still followed him occasionally, they no longer had the power to wound. "Another invitation," he said, tossing it onto the table. "Lady Pemberton's autumn gala. Shall we attend?" Eleanor considered. "Only if they seat us far from Lord and Lady Thornton." Thomas laughed. "Caroline has stopped attending events where we are present. Apparently my continued existence unsettles her." "Good." He crossed to her and pulled her into his arms. "You are a vengeful woman, Lady Severley." "Only toward those who deserve it." She kissed him. "And only when I am not otherwise occupied." Through the window, London glittered in the autumn light. Somewhere in this vast city, there were other invisible women, other wounded men, other people who believed their stories had ended. Eleanor hoped they would find each other, as she and Thomas had, not through rescue or redemption, but through the simple, radical act of seeing one another clearly and choosing to stay.